Okay, you're making progress in the semester. Now it's time to think about scheduling that second three-way meeting. What do you need to get there? Well, now we have to build towards what we call the formative assessment. Over here in the margin, again, we have some helpful guidance. The second three-way meeting, so we've already got the first here with the date and the yes. Everything above it built toward it. Now the formative is cumulative. So now we're down here at the formative, everything before it is going to build towards the formative, and that will be discussed in the second three-way meeting. Now what actually gets factored into the formative? We're going to look at that form in just a minute. But so that you're clear, it's the first announced observation, the first unannounced observation, and the second announced observation. Additionally, our teacher candidates have set their goal, and finally, they've been dealing with student feedback. So let's look at the other CAP guidelines website to see how these forms support students. So we're done with pre-cycle, we're done with step 1, we're done with step 2, we're now in this 3-4 space. So in the step 3, it's got a CAP observation form. That is going to be your second announced observation. This CAP student feedback form, let's talk about that for a minute. There is no official documentation for student feedback on that online account. But you, as the program supervisor and the supervising practitioner, can take that into account when you're crafting the formative assessment. So let's just take a moment to look at it. So student feedback form is administered to the children and is a place where, an opportunity for the teacher candidate to get a sense of how do the students think and feel about how the class is going so far. What you'll see at the top of this form, it says grades 3 through 5 and 6 through 12, and there's a standard form, a short form, and a mini form. Right now we're suggesting that you use the shortest form possible because this administration, of course, does detract from instructional time, and all of these instruments are seen as valuable. If you have younger learners, we have a protocol that's the scroll down, K2 discussion protocol. So make sure that and it provides model discussion prompts. All these are clickable links available on this website. Make sure that you're clear with your department about which kinds of student feedback forms are the most appropriate. But again, nothing is actually documented on the DesiCap online website, the account website where you're filling all this information in, but it should be factored into the discussion that you all have at the formative assessment. Let's look at the formative assessment page now. So here we are, all the way down, ready for view formative assessment. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and unlock this form. Again, you can unlock any forms, just so that you can see what it will look like when you get there. Now I've got a lot of content in here, and I'm going to zoom in for you. This very first measure is well-structured lessons. That's the element. Note that it then has quality on the first column. How can I slide? There we go. Scope in the second column and consistency in the third. And then you identify whether or not the teacher candidate has already met the readiness for teaching threshold. There's no need for any students to meet that threshold. They only need to meet that threshold when they're done at the summative. Remember that students need to have a proficient for quality at the end of the semester, needs improvement for scope, and needs improvement for consistency. So how do you make these ratings? Well, fortunately, the folks over at DESI created an interface that pulls in all of the feedback, all of the evidence, I should say, that you collected over the semester. So here were the ratings we just looked at for well-structured lessons. This was a drop-down menu choice. This student had needs improvement for quality, needs improvement for scope, needs improvement for consistency, so she wasn't meeting the readiness threshold just yet, so I have a no toggled over here. Any additional evidence, maybe I ran another observation, maybe I wanted to talk about the impact on student learning, I can type in and enter in here. Otherwise, I'm going to simply write, please see, and I reference each of the observations down here. Where did all of the text here come from? This is from the content that you entered in the announced observation number 1, the unannounced observation number 1, and the unannounced observation number 2 in the calibrated evidence box. So it's not from the program supervisor data, it's not from the supervising practitioner content, it's from that third box, calibrated evidence, which you as the program supervisor were probably doing most of the writing of. So this should look familiar, but it's nice because now you can read across and say, oh, have they been growing? And I have it organized by commendations and recommendations, which I find helpful. Great, am I seeing the recommendations being addressed? So if I were to scroll down here, oh look, she's got these recommendations. Did I see that in the second observation, the student, really, addressed those recommendations I had made? And that's gonna help me be able to make these ratings. You'll have these ratings done for every single element: well-structured lessons, adjustment to practice, meeting diverse needs, safe learning environment, high expectations, and reflective practice. I'm going to pause here at meeting diverse needs. Now, I had the student was rated as unsatisfactory across the board. That clearly is a place that showed she needed work. This is again at the formative. But I was a little anxious because, wow, she was still at the lowest rating on every measure. Had she not grown at all the whole first half of the semester? Well, I think one of the challenges we ran into is, let's look at the data we have. I've got one statement of commendation here in the announced observation 1. I have nothing in the unannounced observation number 1. And my observation number 2, I just have a little bit of commendations and very little in recommendations. There's just not a lot to go on. So maybe the student isn't making expected progress, but I also don't have a lot of data for her. So this is unfortunate that we didn't have more for her. Remember that you are directly making observations here in the announced observations, and the supervising practitioner is leading here. But you can have an impact on that unannounced observation by reviewing the student's lesson plan, really critically reading their reflection, and maybe even having a discussion with them about the lesson if you really feel like you need more content. So those calibrated teacher-candidate feedback sections in each observation are really important because they're going to give you the evidence you need to create a rating up above. Now, sometimes my students do actually hit on readiness threshold met. So for this particular student, she did a great job on safe learning environment. She got proficient, needs improvement, and so she met it even at the formative. So that was great to see. Here's all the evidence that I used to base my rating on. At the bottom of the page, after all of the different measures, I have the option of clicking on Require a Fifth Observation. For different programs, you're going to be required to conduct additional observations. This is a way to get it documented on the CAP account website. Otherwise, you're just submitting it to your department, so you can discuss that with your department. When you do identify a fifth observation, what you want to do is identify the areas that you're going to really focus on the student. This is a nice place to give them an opportunity to highlight the goal that they had set for themselves. So if you identify meeting diverse needs, which happen to be the student's goal, it's a great place to say, oh, I'm now measuring more of what's going on with your goal. Remember that at the end, you're always going to click Complete and Save Your Work. As you're going down, click Save Your Work, and always work in a web browser other than Internet Explorer. Use Safari or Google Chrome or Mozilla, one of those. And whenever you're entering text, which you're not doing a lot of on this page because this just all already came in automatically, but if you're entering in any text, write it in the Word document and then cut and paste in here. Finally, I just want to address the goal setting, student feedback forms, and impact on student learning. So we're going to jump back to the other form. Here on the CAP guidelines, we know we're through pre-cycle, step 1, step 2, and we were transitioning into step 3 and step 4. The CAP student feedback forms, the student goal setting, the finalized goal, and the impact on student learning that was established in your orientation meeting with a supervising practitioner, none of them have any formal documentation on the DESE CAP online account portal. There is no follow-up on it at all. So it really comes down to you and what you want to do. What I've done with the goal is I have my students give a brief presentation of how they've met the goal at the end of the semester. Not required, but they did so much work on their goal and then there was no way of really capturing that. So I found that that was really useful. I did that after the formative, but it's still nice to consider that goal in that formative meeting. The student feedback is listed right here in step 3, which means that you need to have your students administer those feedback forms. Again, those are the ones that are done by grade bracket and may be more or less appropriate for different domains and fields. So discuss that with your department. Those should be administered so that the discussion can happen about the results at that formative as well. Nothing gets documented on it, but it's just an opportunity for you to help get more information for the formative. Finally, the impact on student learning, which was that tried and true assessment that the supervising practitioner identified earlier in the semester that the teacher candidate was going to administer. that is also not followed up on that DesiCap online portal, so just take it into consideration as you're running the formative or the summative, depending on when it's administered. Great, so that is your three-way meeting prep, and now you're ready for your three-way meeting where you'll discuss the student's formative assessment ratings. So you want to make sure that that formative assessment form online has been completed by you and the supervising practitioner has looked at it and given the go-ahead. What I tend to do is print out the form and bring it to the meeting, although as soon as we both hit complete and save, it is available to the student. You want to address any of the things like goals, student feedback, and the impact on student learning in that meeting as well. And then you only have one more formal observation and the summative, and then you're done for the semester.